I recently moved into a new house over the weekend and have already paid the first month's rent. I signed a 1-year lease. The house, despite its 1930s construction, holds up well. There is still a significant amount of work to be done, a peculiar layout, and an unfinished porch. Okay, it's a humble house, but I had to make the most of what I had. When I saw the house posted on Craigslist, I immediately called the number listed and asked if I could view it that day or another day during the week. The man immediately strikes me as unsettling. He's not overtly spooky just yet, but he certainly irritates me. We arranged to meet that Saturday so he could show me the inside of the house. He texted me every day, multiple times, to make sure you're absolutely certain you want to view the house because I don't want my time wasted. I assured him several times that I literally live 5 minutes away, and I will be there on Saturday, no question. I should mention that I found a house for me and my elderly father, who is in a wheelchair, to move into. The landlord was out in the yard waiting with a huge smile on his face. My father got out of the car and into his chair after I waved hello and went to my passenger side door. The landlord's face immediately changes to a scowl. As we approach him, my dad extends his hand for a handshake, but the landlord simply glances at me and says, "I thought it was just you," while completely ignoring my dad. I awkwardly tried to explain. I didn't think to mention it since he didn't ask. He then proceeded to show us around the house. It's livable, so we give him the deposit. All is well. We moved over the weekend and paid the rent on the 6th. The landlord told me he would need access to the house today to do some plumbing work. I assure him that I'll be at work and I'll leave the key above the door for him. I usually leave work around 12:30 and I informed him of this in advance. Around 10, he texted me again, requesting confirmation that I would not be present before 12:30 due to a safety hazard. I say yes, I will be there after 12:30. In fact, I ended up leaving quite early. At 11, I plan to return home and inform the landlord of my presence while remaining outside. Remember how I mentioned earlier that the layout of the house was unusual? It's because the front door leads directly into a bedroom. This is my bedroom. To the left, there's a door leading to the living room, which connects to the kitchen and the back room/bathroom. I turned the doorknob, finding it unlocked. Upon entering, all I witnessed was my landlord hastily leaving my room, making his way through the living room, kitchen, back room, and out the back door. I then see his car race out of my driveway. Unexpectedly, I return to my bedroom and discover my underwear drawer strewn open. My nightstand was open too. At this point, I'm at a loss for what to do. Finding housing with my credit score is challenging, and finding a place that is wheelchair accessible is even more challenging. As much as I'd like to say, let's not meet again, no, I'm going to have to deal with you for 12 more months. Please leave my underwear alone, you fucking creep. I woke up in the middle of the night remembering this and felt the need to express it. When I was about 16, my dad, brothers, and I lived in an old rundown house in the middle of nowhere. It was a private rental. My brother would do work for the landlord to pay our rent. Our landlord didn't come across as particularly creepy, perhaps because I rarely went outside when he came over to talk to my dad. He wouldn't dare do anything in front of my dad. I was home alone one day. My dad and brothers went out somewhere, but I can't recall exactly where. I had my dog in a fenced-in yard outside, but that was it. I was occupied in my room, likely playing The Sims 2. We lived in the middle of nowhere, and the window of my bedroom directly faced a long driveway. I could see or hear anyone driving up the driveway. I saw a car, not my dad's, and immediately freaked out. I hurriedly closed all the blinds in the house, switched off all the lights, and double-checked the locks on the doors. It was our landlord. He lived next door, about 2 miles from our house, and yes, that was the closest house. This wasn't the first time he'd come here unexpectedly. It had happened twice before, and both times I was home alone. In the first 2 instances, he stayed for only 10 minutes, strolling around the exterior of the house before swiftly departing. But this time was different. I grabbed a big kitchen knife and hid under the kitchen table. He pulled up outside and opened our front gate. My dog was barking wildly outside, and I heard him yell, "Shut up, Mutt." I could hear his footsteps as he approached the door. He attempted to enter through the front door. I was freaking out. At this point, I texted my dad. He was coming straight home, but it would take them about an hour. He proceeded to stroll around the exterior of our house, attempting to peer through each window. The house is old and has 3 doors you can enter from the outside. He tried to open all 3. I thought maybe he didn't know I was home. Perhaps the last 2 instances were merely coincidental. but he started saying things, including calling out my name. He knew I was home alone. I couldn't hear what else he was saying through the double brick walls, but I quietly creeped through the house, following his voice up and down the hallway. I was trying to hear what he was saying. That's when he said something I'll never forget. "I'm going to burn the house down, but I'll let you out first." Naturally, I didn't take him seriously, which further intensifies my fear. He wanted me to come out. He wanted me to take his threat seriously. That's the part that gets me. I know exactly what would have happened if I had believed him, and my life would have been completely different. He remained there for at least half an hour, if not more. He was persistent. He left before my dad came home. I told him everything, and we moved out soon after. I still don't know how he knew I was home alone. My dad didn't see him on the way out. He knew my dad was gone because there was no car in the driveway. But how could he know I wasn't with him? About 3 years ago, only a couple of months after we got together, me and my boyfriends were planning to move out together and had been viewing one-bedroom flats. Despite our lack of luck, we managed to find a potential one-bedroom flat, but it was located in a converted house rather than a block. They had separated the upstairs from the downstairs, creating a small porch and 2 doors, one leading upstairs to our flat and the other to the ground floor where the landlord resided. We accepted the flat before meeting the landlord, and it's something I deeply regret to this day. When we did meet him, as he was away while we were viewing the flat, I can only say that first impressions of a person matter. A lot. This whole gut feeling thing is real, and I should have followed it. He spoke in a common British accent, which irritated me from the start. He looked strange, with horribly intense, creepy blue eyes. I can't even remember vividly what he looked like because something about him made me not want to look him in the eye. Well, first meetings and impressions aside, he seemed kind of rough but was polite, and explained the rules of living in the flat. Before I continue, I would like to express my dissatisfaction with this flat. Particularly, we used pound coins to operate the electric meter, which appeared significantly more costly than usual. The landlord told us to keep in mind that we were only paying for electricity to run the upstairs of a small house, and it was costing us about £20 a week, the same amount my parents pay for their entire house in the same area. I can't remember how we paid for gas, but we didn't have a meter. The landlord also told us we would be unable to have internet while we lived there, as it would involve making holes in the walls. We included the council tax in our rent, which meant the landlord would pay it for us. Seemed off. It also didn't help that the estate agent conveniently forgot to mention that his wife had died, and that was why he had converted the upstairs. The landlord conveyed this information to us without any discomfort, and I couldn't help but wonder if I was sleeping in the same room where she had died. The first time the landlord confirmed my suspicions of being a bit strange was when we moved in. He told us he had left a sofa in the living room and we could do what we wanted with it, throw it away, keep it, sell it. My parents, who were in need of a temporary sofa, offered to take it off our hands. While my dad and boyfriend were assisting with the placement of the sofa in the back of his car, the landlord, who had been gardening, became extremely upset, claiming it was an anniversary present. Instead of instructing my dad and boyfriend to leave the sofa in the garden for him to find a suitable place, he ordered them to carry it to his garage. Horribly embarrassed, my dad and boyfriend did what he said and let it be. It may appear to be an absurd justification for developing animosity toward an individual. However, the manner in which he reacted, his conduct, and his rudeness regarding the matter were all relevant factors. He had previously informed us that he was unconcerned about our actions with the item, and now it was a gift for our anniversary. How could we not have consulted him beforehand? A couple of weeks later, we start noticing that he smoked pot. A lot of pot. The constant smell of pot on the porch was embarrassing for us when guests came over. Disclaimer: I'm not against pot at all. I've even tried some myself, but the smell can be a bit gross when it's not me smoking it. I must admit, I did not give it much consideration. However, the constant odor of marijuana emanating from our apartment did not improve my perception of him. Another reason he made me uncomfortable. I used to work at a bar for the first few months I lived there, and whenever my dad dropped me off home at 3 a.m., when most of my shifts finished, he would look out of his living room window. It was unsettling to see his shadowy silhouette standing there as I made my way to the front door, regardless of the time I returned. He also never approached me, always talked to my fiancé instead. Early in the morning, when my fiancé had come home from work, the landlord had opened the door to tell him that I was too noisy coming in at night and that he needed to tell me to be more quiet. This is coming from a man who was occupied with unknown activities downstairs at absurd hours of the morning. Flash forward a couple of months. I realize I'm pregnant. Me and the fiancé are super happy. One night, we have some friends over, and the next day, we go out to tell my parents about our pregnancy. Before I continue, I should mention that my fiancé and I occasionally smoked indoors when we couldn't bring ourselves to go outside. I used to smoke outside the bathroom window when my partner was at work during the night shift, so I didn't have to go out alone and risk encountering a creepy landlord. One afternoon, me and my fiancé are cuddling and watching a film together. We hear a knock at the door. The landlord is requesting that we empty the electric meter. Strange, considering he'd only emptied it a week ago, but I couldn't tell my partner since I hid whenever the landlord came in because of how uncomfortable he made me. Sitting in the living room with the door closed due to the mess, I overhear the landlord and my fiancé engaging in small talk. However, the landlord has not set up his ladder to reach the electric meter. I hear him start to walk around the flat, his voice irritated and angry, while my fiancé tries to remain formal and polite. I move to a position near the door to improve my hearing. My fiancé informs me later that the landlord decided to conduct a sudden inspection of the flat. He'd walked directly into the bathroom and pointed at cigarette ash on the windowsill, not even hesitating or looking anywhere else. We were pretty unclean people back then. Before he had the chance to go any further, I opened the living room door with our contract in hand and shouted at him, reading out the part that said he wasn't allowed to enter and inspect the flat without 2 weeks' notice. With a defiant smile, he responded that technically my boyfriend had let him in, so it didn't matter. We argued for a bit until he blurted out, "When were you going to tell me you were pregnant?" I'll always remember the deathly silence that followed after that, only broken by me. I asked him how he knew. He told me he'd heard us talking about it. I informed him that we hadn't discussed it anywhere, but he might have overheard us if he planned to evict us, knowing that we would eventually move out to find 2 bedrooms. He then informed us that he had learned about the situation through Facebook. I had my Facebook privacy settings set to the highest level possible. My fiancé didn't allow anyone who wasn't friends with him to see his statuses. Later, when we tried to look him up, we discovered that he didn't even have a Facebook account. I relayed this information to the landlord, who then refuted it once more, claiming that a friend had informed him. This 40-year-old man, who had not received any visitors in the 6 months we had lived there, received a message from a friend. We got him to leave and both sat down, freaking the fuck out. The realization dawned on us that he didn't bother to empty the electric meter prior to his departure, negating the initial purpose of his knock. Despite knowing that the landlord had been entering when we weren't present, I remained silent. My partner admitted a couple of minutes later that the landlord must have been coming in when we weren't there. He instantly recognized the location of the cigarette ash on the windowsill. The bathroom window was never open much when I did smoke, since it was restricted by a child lock and would have looked like steam if he'd had looked up and saw it coming out of the window. I also never smoked out of it during the day, only at inconvenient times in the morning, and rarely smoked at all. More importantly, how in the hell did he know I was pregnant? We identified a method he might have been familiar with. During your initial midwife appointment, you receive books, leaflets, and other materials to place in a folder and carry to subsequent appointments. This was placed on my desk in the living room, a room he hadn't visited during his surprise inspection. Had he gone through it? We searched for cameras and the smoke alarm and various other places in the flat, but the landlord had done the construction work himself, so we had no way of knowing about any recording hardware without breaking the place apart. We weren't able to move out until our contract allowed us to. I had to live there for a month in the early stages of pregnancy, above a man who was either entering our flat when we were not there or recording us. We had enough evidence in our minds, but nothing solid enough to go to the police. I kept a key in the door every night so he wouldn't be able to use it, just in case. Closer to the termination date of our contract, we wrote official letters to the estate agent explaining the circumstances. We had reason to believe he was entering without our knowledge, recording us, and wrote one official letter to the landlord, posting it through his letterbox. The humorous thing, he didn't confront us about it. He didn't inform us that we were fabricating stories or lying, just ignored us whenever we saw him. We successfully vacated the flat and relocated to a new one, which was equally unappealing and rife with issues. However, the most problematic aspect remains to be revealed. We held numerous meetings with the estate agent, discussing all the issues related to the flat, such as the electric meter and the lack of internet access. The estate agent even informed us that he had discussed the allegations with the landlord who had resolved them. Whatever that means. Once we'd settled into the new flat, out of curiosity, we looked online. The same estate agent had once again listed the flat. Despite the possibility that he was filming or monitoring his tenants, the estate agent proceeded to relist the property. It still scares me to think that innocent couples like us could be moving in there, unaware that the person below them has the freedom to come and go as they please, or could be filming them doing all sorts of things. When I was in my early 20s and living in Chicago, I wasn't making much money. When I found this apartment, it was too good to be true. The top floor of a duplex with 6 rooms for $775 a month. The agent who showed me the apartment stressed to me that the landlords were very religious. I didn't have a problem with that, even if it did sound a little ominous. The landlords were an elderly couple that lived downstairs. They seemed okay at first. When I saw them in the yard, they would smile at me. I took good care of the house. Then, when they saw I was having my boyfriend over, things started to get really weird. One day I was in my office writing. I hear a knock at the door. I open it and it's the old lady from downstairs. Before I can say hello, she says, "Have you ever gotten an abortion?" I shut the door in her face. No thanks. This was a colossal mistake. The house was laid out kind of weird. There was a door at the bottom of a flight of stairs that I thought led to a communal laundry room, but after accidentally opening it once, I discovered it led directly into my landlord's living room. I unfortunately learned this the hard way. I was in my kitchen cooking, my boyfriend was at work, and I was by myself when I heard what sounded like the click of a door. "Okay," I say out loud. "What the fuck was that?" I didn't really make the connection. It could have been the door that led into their living room. I walk into the hallway and look around. I don't see anyone at the end of the hallway. I poke my head into all of the rooms. Nobody there. Then I look down the staircase, leading to their house, and the neighbor lady is standing there staring me down. I screamed. She flinched and stepped back into her apartment and swung the door shut. After that, every time I left the house, and I spent every possible moment out of the house after that incident, I would come back and something would have been moved. A window would be shut. Once, the shower was dripping and my towel was damp. I couldn't lock the door because since it was technically a door to their house, they were the only ones with the key. The knocking got so frequent, 3 or 4 times a day, that me and my boyfriend propped up an old mattress so we wouldn't have to hear it while we slept. The second to last straw was when I opened the door for work and the stairs were gone. I physically could not leave my house because there were no stairs. They had been dismantled and were sitting on their porch. I called them repeatedly, but they didn't answer. Finally, their son came out of the house and explained that they were remodeling their porch. He told me I had to cut through their apartment downstairs. I descended the stairs and opened the door, and they were both sitting at their filthy kitchen table, staring at me. The phone was in its case. They must have heard it ringing. They kept staring at me with this blank look on their faces. I crossed their kitchen and left out their back door. A few days later, I came home from my job and noticed the bathroom floor was almost completely flooded, like somebody left a faucet on or the shower on. The old woman, seeing that I had come home, came upstairs and knocked, screaming at me that I had flooded the bathroom and that her son had to come fix it. I was so run down at this point that I just told her it was okay. Her son comes by a few hours later. He is shit-faced. I open the door and tell him that I need an hour or so before he comes, and he picks something up and swings it at me. It was a massive wrench. I somehow duck out of the way, and he stumbles over. I book it down the newly repaired stairs as quickly as possible and call the police. They come by and take down a complaint, but claim since there was no physical contact, they can't do anything. I learned later that the old couple has a daughter on the force. In the middle of the night, me, my boyfriend, and several of his friends packed all of our stuff into a Chevy Astro. We lived in hotels in the van for a month until we found another house. They never attempted to contact us again.